Millionaire CEO spots unique. Mark on homeless woman. Hearing her say his name leaves him completely speechless. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Leah hunched inside a ragged hooded jacket near the edge of Pike Place Market, watching the neon reflection of streetlights ripple across puddles. Rain soaked the worn cardboard beneath her, yet she hardly noticed. All her focus was on the frayed notebook perched on her lap. Her pencil scratched softly across the damp paper, sketching a simple outline of a boat, one she saw only in her dreams and half-formed memories. She didn't know why she kept drawing it. Every night, like clockwork, this image returned, a vessel on open water, sails flapping in the wind, and a distinct feeling of dread. Sometimes she caught herself trembling, though she remembered no specific event, only fragments, only shadows. One constant in her recollections was the small, star-shaped scar on her wrist. It pulsed with a strange ache whenever the nightmares came. A few blocks away, in a sleek, high-rise office, Bruce Bell stared through a wall of glass overlooking Seattle's glimmering skyline. The city lights, blurred by heavy droplets on the window, mirrored his state of mind, unfocused and tinged with melancholy. At 48, the esteemed CEO of Auratech Innovations had the aura of a man who'd achieved everything professionally, yet felt a deep void. His tailored suit and immaculate desk spoke of success, but the restlessness in his gaze revealed another story. He absent-mindedly drummed his fingertips on a glossy fundraiser invitation for an upcoming gala, exhaling heavily at the thought of yet another social obligation. Even with the hum of technology around him, monitors, status reports, messages waiting, his attention drifted to a framed photograph on a nearby shelf. It showed a younger Bruce smiling, arms wrapped lovingly around a woman. Though her face was only partially visible, the radiant happiness frozen in time still stung. He swallowed the ache and turned his back on the photo, preparing to leave. Outside, a storm raged with no sign of stopping. Back at the market, Leah's pencil line faltered when a gust of cold wind sliced through her. She pulled the notebook closer, hugging the pages protectively. That was when Marcus, an older man with a gentle demeanor, approached. His once thick hair lay flattened by the rain, and his hands trembled from the chill. "Got some extra coffee," he murmured, extending a small paper cup. "Figured you could use it." Leah offered a tired smile. "Thanks." She took a sip of the lukewarm coffee, letting the faint bitterness warm her throat. Marcus was the only person she trusted on these streets. He'd guided her to safer spots, warned her of suspicious figures. Tonight, his presence felt especially comforting. "You keep drawing that boat," Marcus observed, nodding toward her open notebook. "Dream again." She hesitated, eyes flicking to the half-finished sketch. "Yeah, it's always the same." Marcus patted her shoulder gently. "We've all got ghosts, kiddo. Just keep yourself safe. Streets aren't kind." With a nod, he shuffled away, leaving her alone in the drizzle. She watched him fade into the dimly lit sidewalk and thought about his words. Ghosts. Perhaps that was the best term for the swirling images in her head. Across town, Bruce stepped into a private elevator. The moment the doors slid shut, he rubbed his face in exhaustion. He could not stop thinking about how life had led him to a place of comfort, yet crushing solitude. 15 years had passed since that catastrophic day on the water, a day that robbed him of someone he once considered his future. He told himself he needed to move on, but no matter how many board meetings or philanthropic events filled his calendar, that hollow ache lingered. As the elevator descended, the city lights blurred once more behind the glass. Bruce caught his reflection, silver-threaded hair, stern features, a hint of sadness in his eyes. He seldom let anyone see that side. He had a role to play, a strong leader, unstoppable innovator, but alone, on nights like this, the mask slipped. Raindrops pelted the sidewalk as he exited into the storm, bracing himself against the wind. A few miles apart, two figures, Leah, curled under a dripping awning, and Bruce, climbing into his sleek car, each felt a distant pull, though neither could explain why. Outside, the rain intensified, as if urging the city toward a fate both inevitable and mysterious. Neither knew that before the next storm ended, their paths would converge, irrevocably changing the course of their fractured lives. Bruce shifted uncomfortably behind his mahogany desk the next morning, staring at the embossed invitation to the upcoming gala at the Chihley Garden and Glass. His sister, Eleanor Vance, had left him a voicemail, reminding him that the Auratech board expected his presence. The event was a high-profile fundraiser, and skipping it would raise questions about his commitment to the company's public image. He tapped his pen against the invite, ignoring the stale coffee cooling in front of him. His mind kept drifting back to the photograph on the shelf, Leah's smile forever captured in that fleeting moment from 15 years ago. He swallowed hard, scolding himself for letting old memories resurface. Yet the thought of Richard Sterling, also rumored to attend the gala, made his chest tighten with an inexplicable tension. Sterling was an influential figure in marine research these days, or so the press claimed. Bruce's knowledge of that field was limited, but something about the man's rise always left him uneasy. Miles away, Leah was not thinking about fancy galas or technology CEOs. She crouched in the narrow alley adjacent to Pike Place Market, rummaging through a plastic bag Marcus had found. The mid-December wind carried an icy chill, gnawing at her fingers. She checked the contents. 2 dented cans of soup and some packets of crackers. A small victory. Surviving on the streets demanded these incremental triumphs. A bit of food, a piece of cardboard, a friendly word. Her body felt stiff from a night of restless sleep. Flashing images haunted her dreams. A swirling ocean, a powerful wave, someone shouting. She always woke up gasping, pressing her palm over the star-shaped scar on her wrist. She tried to recall the voice in her dream, but it dissolved into the usual fog. Shaking off the unease, she slipped the cans into a worn backpack. Meanwhile, at the sleek Auratech headquarters, Eleanor walked into Bruce's office with a determined stride. Her blonde hair was pinned back, her suit impeccably tailored. "Good morning," she greeted, arching an eyebrow at her brother. "You look like you've barely slept." "I haven't," Bruce admitted, dropping the pen onto the invitation. "This gala, does it really matter if I show my face?" Eleanor offered a sympathetic yet no-nonsense glare. "Yes, it does. The press will be all over it, and the board wants to showcase Auratech's top leadership." "You know how it goes, Bruce," he sighed, rubbing the tension at the back of his neck. "Fine, I'll attend." She studied him, noticing the old photograph behind him. A gentle warmth crept into her voice. "I know you still miss her, but it's been 15 years. Maybe it's time to start thinking about moving forward." Bruce gave a short nod, avoiding her gaze. He didn't have the energy to argue, nor did he have the heart to correct her assumption that moving forward was as simple as choosing to let go. Back on the street, Leah cleared her makeshift sleeping spot. She stuffed her notebook securely into her jacket, careful not to smear the boat drawing. Marcus spotted her from across the alley and shuffled over, his worn boots scraping the wet pavement. "How'd you sleep?" he asked, voice gruff with morning chill. "Not great," Leah murmured, hugging her arms. "I dreamed again." "About the boat?" Marcus asked knowingly. She nodded. "Yeah, still have no idea why." He offered a kind smile. "Sometimes your mind tries to tell you something before you're ready to hear it." He reached into his pocket, handing her a small keychain flashlight, "in case you need it at night." Leah accepted it gratefully. Their conversation paused. when a sudden shout from a nearby vendor startled them. She stiffened, glancing warily down the alley. The vendor was harmless, but she remained on edge. Something in her gut whispered that her current way of life couldn't continue forever. She was running on autopilot, and the thin line between survival and total collapse seemed to be fraying. Across the city, Eleanor left Bruce's office, anxious about the coming gala. Bruce stared at the invitation, then placed it into a sleek leather folder, as if tucking away a burden he couldn't escape. Outside, the winter sky threatened rain yet again, hinting that both he and Leah would soon be caught in a downpour, neither expected, one that would force them to confront the ghosts lurking in their separate worlds. Leah woke with a jolt, heart racing. She was curled on a piece of cardboard beneath a dripping awning near Pike Place Market, the clammy smell of rain-soaked concrete filling her nostrils. Outside, dawn light was muted by clouds, painting the streets in a chilly grey. She couldn't recall the exact nightmare, only that it involved a deafening crash of water and a flash of metal. A shudder crawled through her body. Pulling herself upright, she massaged her temples. The star-shaped scar on her wrist throbbed like an old bruise, and she felt torn between wanting to unravel these nighttime terrors and desperately wishing they'd vanish. She blinked to find Marcus already up, rummaging through a plastic bin for recyclables. She envied how he could greet each morning with calm acceptance, no matter how dire the circumstances. "Bad dreams again?" he asked softly, noticing her grim expression. She exhaled, nodding. "They're getting worse. Sometimes I swear I hear a voice." Marcus frowned with concern. "Might be time to see a doctor, or at least talk with someone who—" She cut him off. No hospitals, no shelters. She wasn't sure why the idea terrified her so deeply, only that each attempt at formal assistance triggered an overpowering anxiety. Maybe it was the fear of being caged, or the worry that the nightmares would only intensify if professionals pried into her mind. Marcus gave a resigned nod, respecting her boundaries. Elsewhere, Bruce stood in his penthouse's living area, flipping through old photographs with shaky hands. He had them stored in a sleek album tucked away behind rows of business journals. Most were pictures of him and Leah in their 20s, her bright grin, both of them wearing life vests on a small research boat, the sun painting their faces with gold. He trailed his finger over her image, recalling the spark in her eyes whenever she talked about marine life. It had been her world, her passion. He sighed, returning the album to its hiding place. If only he could banish these memories as easily as shutting a book. But the memory of that catastrophic day refused to fade. The frantic phone call, the endless search, and then emptiness. For 15 years, he'd lived with the notion that Leah was gone forever, lost to the sea. Even now, he questioned if he should have done more to investigate the accident. Self-reproach lingered. At Auratech headquarters that morning, Richard Sterling's name cropped up in a meeting about potential collaborations in marine-focused technology. Bruce felt an immediate stab of unease. While he'd never confronted Sterling directly about the past, there was an undercurrent of tension he couldn't quite explain. Sterling's current success in marine bioresearch followed suspiciously soon after Leah's disappearance. Bruce forced himself to remain composed in front of his staff, but the thought churned restlessly in his mind. Meanwhile, Leah moved through her day in a cautious routine. She and Marcus found a bit of leftover soup at a nearby church charity stall, and the warmth of each spoonful steadied her nerves. Still, the nightmares clung. Late afternoon found her strolling along the boardwalk near the Seattle waterfront. Drawn inexplicably to the ocean's edge, the smell of salt water made her heart pound. She paused by a railing, wind whipping her hair. The waves, though gentle, stirred something deep within her, a memory or feeling she couldn't fully grasp. As the daylight waned, she retrieved her notebook and jotted stray thoughts, hoping to capture any stray recollection that might surface. Instead, she sketched the outline of a coastline, half buried in fog, with a single figure staring out to sea. Her pulse quickened when she realized she'd drawn a second shape in the distance, as if someone were calling from across the waves. Alarmed, she snapped the notebook shut. That night, a cold drizzle began again. Bruce, alone in his upscale penthouse, tried unsuccessfully to read a report on projected revenues. His gaze drifted to the window where rain blurred the skyline. On the streets below, Leah found herself trembling under another awning, hugging her knees, unable to shake off the echo of the day's haunting sensations. Both lay awake, separated by wealth and circumstance, yet bound by the same relentless ghosts that would not let them rest. The next day brought a sharper chill, and the early winter sky glowered with dark clouds promising more rain. Bruce sat in a tense board meeting at Aura Tech, fiddling with his pen. He knew his public persona as CEO demanded composure, yet his mind kept wandering to the upcoming charity gala. Eleanor shot him a sympathetic glance from across the conference table. "Mr. Bell," one of the board members ventured, "we're pleased to announce that Richard Sterling's firm will also be at the Chihuly Garden event. It could be a great networking opportunity for some crossover research." Bruce forced a polite nod. "I see. Let's ensure everything is prepared." Inside, he felt a knot of unease. Sterling's presence unsettled him, especially as the date of the gala drew nearer. After the meeting, Eleanor pulled him aside. "Look," she said gently, "I know you're not fond of these social obligations, but we have to be there. Sterling will probably make a show of his latest innovations in marine biology. That might open doors, or at least let us gauge his next moves." She gave Bruce's arm a reassuring squeeze. "You'll get through this, okay?" He managed a thin smile. "Right. Thanks." Meanwhile, Leah paced the back alleys, occasionally glancing up at the office towers looming above. Their glass windows reflected a world that seemed light years from hers. She and Marcus had relocated to a quieter spot beneath a wide marquise, seeking a little more protection from the biting wind. She felt tension creeping through her shoulders, a nagging sense that her current life was unsustainable. Surviving day to day had become second nature, but something inside her insisted that she was meant for more. As she sipped a small cup of tea from a local mission, Leah shivered at the memory of her last nightmare. A flash of lightning across the sea, a woman's desperate scream, and a man's voice shouting her name in panic. It left her shaken each time. Yet with each recollection, the star-shaped scar on her wrist seemed to grow heavier. She pressed her palm over it now, as though trying to quell the dull ache. Marcus ambled over, handing her a thin blanket. "We could check the city shelter tonight. Weather's turning bad, Leah." She swallowed hard, wanting to resist, but a swirl of exhaustion made her waver. "I'll think about it," she mumbled. The idea of stepping into a structured program or being monitored by staff filled her with dread, but the chill in her bones reminded her that the streets could be just as terrifying. In a sleek corner office high above them, Bruce concluded a conference call. He leaned back in his executive chair, massaging the tension in his temples. He was a man admired in business circles, his acumen, his philanthropy, his calm leadership style. Yet inside, the quiet ache persisted. The day's obligations finished. He stood to gaze out the window. Seattle's skyline stretched before him, a mosaic of concrete and lights. He imagined the bustle below, crowds, traffic, huddled figures rushing through the cold. For a moment, he wondered if Leah could possibly still be out there. Then he banished the notion, scolding himself for indulging impossible hopes. In another part of town, Leah tore a page from her notebook, an attempt at a self-portrait that came out blurred. She saw dark curls around a face that held more questions than answers. Her eyes were wide, haunted. "I need to do something," she whispered to herself, uncertain of what that might be. Surviving on scraps and fleeting kindnesses no longer felt bearable. By late afternoon, the wind picked up, whistling through the alleys. A feeling of inevitability hovered in the air, as though two worlds were on a collision course. Bruce dreaded the forced smiles and corporate pleasantries at the gala, yet felt an inexplicable tug drawing him forward. Leah felt compelled to keep moving, keep searching for a missing piece of herself, even if she wasn't sure where to look. The space between their lives, one of glossy boardrooms and one of sodden pavements, was about to narrow in ways neither could predict. Wind whipped through the glass sculptures outside the Chihuly garden and glass, casting distorted reflections across the rain-slicked pathways. The gala inside was elegant and bright, full of clinking champagne glasses, soft jazz music, and conversations about philanthropy. Bruce Bell stood near a corner display, loosening the collar of his dress shirt as he forced small talk with a group of donors. He was well versed in the polite dance of these events, but every passing minute felt heavier than the last. Across the room, Eleanor observed her brother's distraction, noticing how his gaze wandered toward the entrance whenever the grand doors swung open. Richard Sterling had arrived earlier, but Bruce had barely acknowledged him. She guessed Bruce was simply enduring the evening until he could make a discreet exit, fulfilling his duty to Aura Tech's public image. Outside, the night sky unleashed a torrent of rain, pounding the pavement in sheets that glimmered under streetlights. Bundled in a damp jacket, Leah hovered near a side entrance used by staff and caterers. She hadn't planned to be here. She was simply searching for a dry overhang after leaving the overcrowded shelter. The sound of music and laughter inside sparked a flicker of curiosity. A momentary ache gripped her chest. She couldn't recall the last time she'd felt part of anything joyful or safe. She pulled the hood tighter over her curly hair, trying to shrink into the shadows. Through the faint glow of a corridor light, she noticed someone had propped open the door for ventilation. The warmth of the interior beckoned, but it also intimidated her. She was about to slip away when a gust of wind blew the door wide, and a burst of chatter and music spilled out. Startled, she pressed against the wall, inadvertently exposing the scar on her wrist as she lifted her arm. Inside, Bruce had finally excused himself from conversation, heading toward the exit. He planned to leave early, well before the gala ended. The synergy of small talk and forced smiles had depleted him. As he neared the back corridor, a chilling draft of rain-soaked air reached him, and a swirl of wet leaves blew in. Turning to see who might be standing there, he froze. A woman crouched low, her posture tense, as though ready to bolt. Her jacket was soaked, hair dripping from the storm, but even in the dim light, his eyes locked on her wrist. A small, star-shaped scar caught the reflection of the corridor bulbs. His heart thundered in his chest. For an instant, time felt suspended. 15 years vanished in a heartbeat. "Leah," he murmured, scarcely audible over the rainfall. His rational mind screamed that it couldn't be her. This must be an illusion, an echo of longing. Yet he couldn't deny the star-shaped scar he'd memorized all those years ago. Leah jerked her gaze up. In that flicker of a second, a wave of recognition cut through the fog of her amnesia, though she didn't yet grasp why. She stared at the tall, silver-haired man in a sleek suit, his expression a mix of shock and heartbreak. A name emerged from the haze in her mind, forming on her lips before she could stop it. "Bruce!" The moment she spoke, it was as if the world around them vanished. The swirl of guests inside, the pounding rain, the hiss of traffic. Bruce stood rooted to the spot, trying to speak, but finding his voice stuck in his throat. This couldn't be real, yet there she was, eyes wide, face smudged with dirt and rain, but undeniably the woman he'd lost. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Leah felt panic surging inside her. She didn't understand how she knew his name, only that it tumbled from a buried place in her memory. She turned as if to run, but Bruce instinctively stepped forward, hands trembling. "Please," he managed to say, voice shaking. "Wait." For a tense heartbeat, neither moved. Then something in Leah's exhausted eyes flickered. She allowed him to guide her indoors, away from the storm. He called for assistance, voice quavering with urgency. In that instant of recognition, two souls colliding under the downpour, the separate worlds they inhabited began to fuse into one. A fragile hope glimmered that maybe, just maybe, they could reclaim whatever was lost. Leah sat on the edge of a plush bed at the Hotel Endra, stomach twisting with a mix of relief and anxiety. The room felt too quiet after the bustling streets, almost unnervingly so. Soft, modern lighting illuminated a neatly made bed, tasteful artwork on the walls, and a small table bearing a vase of white lilies. She touched the crisp sheets, amazed at their warmth compared to the damp cardboard she'd slept on for months. Moments earlier, she had nearly bolted from the hotel lobby, overwhelmed by the bright lights and curious stares, but Bruce's gentle insistence convinced her to stay. He'd even paid in cash to avoid unnecessary publicity. Now, as she glanced at her reflection in a large mirror, she hardly recognized the gaunt face that stared back. Her lips felt chapped, and there were faint bruises under her eyes from countless sleepless nights. The star-shaped scar on her wrist looked out of place against the fresh bandages a nurse had applied for a minor scratch. A hesitant knock on the door made her flinch. Bruce stepped in, balancing a tray of soup, bread, and bottled water. "I thought you might be hungry," he said awkwardly. For a moment, they just looked at one another, still grappling with the impossible fact that they were face to face again after 15 years of presumed tragedy. He set the tray down on a side table, taking a seat in a small armchair. "Thank you," Leah managed, her voice rasping from disuse. She lifted the soup spoon, the steam curling upward. Her hands trembled slightly. The taste of creamy broth against her tongue felt like a luxury. She blinked back tears, humiliated by her own vulnerability. Bruce cleared his throat. "We should probably get you checked out by a medical professional." He paused, struggling to word things delicately. "I reached out to someone, a trauma specialist, Dr. Evelyn Hayes. She's well regarded and discreet." At the name of a doctor, Leah's stomach clenched. Instinct told her to run, that doctors asked too many questions, questions she might not want to face. But a flicker of memory flashed in her mind. Someone mentioning therapy, urgent voices, a sense that she needed more help than just a bed. She exhaled shakily. "I can try, but I don't want a bunch of tests. I can't handle that." Bruce's expression softened. "I understand. No pressure. She'll only do what you're comfortable with. I promise." He studied her, remembering how fearless she used to be. She was Leah Baxter, once a bright marine biologist full of life and laughter. Now she looked small and cautious, eyes darting as though she might vanish at any moment. After a long moment, Leah nodded. "I'll talk to her." It was a tentative step, but a step nonetheless. Later that evening, Dr. Evelyn Hayes arrived at the suite. She was a tall woman in her 50s with kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. Bruce introduced them briefly before stepping out to grant privacy. Leah, perched uneasily on the bed, watched the doctor approach with a calm, measured demeanor. "Leah," Dr. Hayes said gently, "I'm here to help you. We'll go as slowly as you need. All right?" Leah hesitated. I don't remember much," she whispered. "My memories, they come in flashes, nightmares." "That's understandable," Dr. Hayes replied, taking a seat in the armchair. "We'll work through it together." The first session was short, 20 minutes of basic questions about Leah's current mental state, any medical issues she knew of, and her comfort level with continuing therapy. Leah answered haltingly, clinging to whatever scraps of self-preservation she had left. By the end, her heart pounded with both relief and fear. When Dr. Hayes finally closed her notebook, she gave Leah an encouraging smile. "You've already taken a big step. I'll be here whenever you're ready for more." Long after Dr. Hayes and Bruce left her alone, Leah stared at the city lights beyond the window, mind whirling with conflicting emotions. Something in her chest felt raw, but a dim hope stirred as well. She was still Leah, whoever that truly was, and maybe, just maybe, this was the first fragile sign that she could reclaim her life beyond the shadows. Leah squirmed under the fluorescent lights of Nordstrom, glancing nervously at racks of clothing. A sales associate approached with a polite but curious smile, while Bruce lingered beside her, arms crossed uneasily. He'd insisted that she pick out some new clothes, even if just a couple of outfits for the sake of decency and comfort. But the formality of a department store, with its pristine floors and echoing music, made her feel exposed. "You can choose whatever you need," Bruce said gently, catching her hesitation. I want you to be warm and to feel better." She nodded, trying to swallow the knot in her throat. Each price tag she peeked at made her cringe, sparking the urge to run out the door. Memories of rummaging for spare change or second-hand items on the street clashed sharply with the upscale aura around her. Still, she managed to select a simple sweater, a pair of jeans, and fresh undergarments. The total at the register rattled her, but Bruce paid without blinking. Outside, the sky was overcast, hinting at another drizzle. Leah glanced toward a newsstand on the corner, biting her lip. She saw her reflection in the glossy covers of tabloids and wondered what people might think of her standing here beside a wealthy CEO. She couldn't possibly fit into his world, could she? They returned to the Hotel Endra, where Eleanor Vance awaited them. Leah felt a jolt of nerves at the sight of Bruce's sister, an elegant woman with a poised demeanor that suggested years of corporate dealings. Eleanor's eyes flashed with initial surprise upon seeing Leah in clean, well-fitting clothes. After a moment, she offered a polite nod. "Leah, I'm glad you're safe." Leah managed a small smile, hugging the shopping bag against her chest. "Thank you," she murmured. Eleanor motioned for them to sit at a small table by the window. She cleared her throat. "Bruce, the press is already picking up rumors that you've taken in a homeless woman. They don't yet know who she is." Her gaze drifted to Leah's face. "But if word gets out that it's Leah, well, the story is going to explode. We need to be prepared." Leah's cheeks burned. She felt an instinctual panic about being thrust into the spotlight. But the more pressing concern was the flicker of old confusion about her past. "Why would the media care?" she whispered. Bruce ran a hand through his hair. "You were presumed dead in a boating accident 15 years ago. Some people knew we were engaged." He paused, meeting her gaze. "Your disappearance was publicized at the time, Leah." She stared blankly, her heart pounding. The notion that the entire city once believed she was gone felt surreal. I didn't know," she managed. Eleanor leaned forward, voice calm but urgent. "Look, I'd like to keep this contained until we can figure out a plan. We have to handle everything carefully." A ripple of tension sparked through Leah. She suddenly recalled seeing a man's face in one of her nightmares, his features blurry, but the dread she felt unmistakable. Was that Sterling? She frowned. "That man, Richard Sterling. Do I know him?" Bruce and Eleanor exchanged a glance. "Yes," Bruce said gently. "He worked closely with you in marine research back then, and he'll be very interested if he finds out you've returned." Something dark flickered in his eyes. With the weight of that information pressing on her, Leah's stomach churned. She clutched her newly purchased clothes, trying to anchor herself against the wave of uncertainty. It didn't help that she still woke up nightly in a sweat, haunted by jumbled visions of a boat and swirling water. When Eleanor left, Leah sank into a nearby armchair, exhaustion evident in her posture. Bruce hovered, clearly torn between relief that she was here and dread at what might happen next. Outside, muted traffic noises filtered through the window as dusk settled over Seattle. "Maybe it's time I see Dr. Hayes again," Leah murmured, half to herself. She felt unsettled and raw, suspicious that something crucial lay buried in her memories. Taking a trembling breath, she resolved to find out exactly what Sterling had to do with the nightmares that kept her awake, and the life she'd lost all those years ago. Leah clutched a paper cup of water in the Swedish Medical Center's reception area, her gaze darting from one white-coat professional to another, sterile corridors, subdued lighting, and the faint smell of disinfectant set her nerves on edge. Bruce sat beside her, flipping through a magazine. Every so often, he'd glance over, offering a reassuring nod. Her second session with Dr. Evelyn Hayes was about to begin, this time in the therapist's hospital-affiliated office. Leah's stomach fluttered at the thought of more probing questions. Still, she recalled the doctor's kind demeanor and reminded herself that she had already taken the first step. If she truly wanted answers, she had to continue. A receptionist called her name, and she rose, feeling an odd mix of dread and determination. Inside the softly lit consultation room, Dr. Hayes sat in a comfortable chair, wearing the same patient expression Leah remembered. A desk occupied one corner, papers neatly stacked. A small digital recorder rested atop it, presumably for note-taking. Leah settled into an armchair, hands clasped in her lap. "Leah, Doctor." Hayes greeted. "How are you feeling today?" "Nervous," Leah admitted, "but ready, I guess." Dr. Hayes offered a gentle smile. "That's perfectly understandable. We'll go slowly, all right?" She then guided Leah through a few breathing exercises to ease the tension in her shoulders. Once Leah's tremors steadied, they began exploring her memories in more detail. Leah described flashes of open water, a sense of panic, and a faint recollection of heated arguments, though she couldn't see who was involved. After 30 minutes of gentle questioning, Dr. Hayes leaned back thoughtfully. "It sounds like your amnesia is tied to severe trauma. Your mind may be protecting you from the intensity of what happened on that boat. But you're making progress." Progress. The word soothed Leah. At least something was happening besides the relentless nightmares. They scheduled another session, and Leah stepped out into the corridor with a mixture of relief and fatigue. Bruce rose from the waiting area, concern etched on his features. "All good?" he asked. She nodded, though tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. "It's hard," she admitted, her voice tight. "But I have to keep going." Later that afternoon, Bruce suggested they visit the Seattle Aquarium, hoping the familiar setting might trigger more positive memories. At first, Leah hesitated, worried she'd embarrass herself if she panicked. But her curiosity won out. Inside the aquarium, children's laughter mingled with the soft hum of water pumps. A glass tunnel curved overhead, filled with shimmering schools of fish. Leah walked slowly, each echoing footstep on the polished floor making her heart pound. Yet something about the aquatic life surrounding her felt strangely comforting. She paused at a display of bioluminescent jellyfish, watching them pulse with glowing color. In a sudden rush of recollection, her mind flicked to a time she'd handled a luminescent deep-sea specimen. The memory was fleeting but vivid enough to leave her momentarily dizzy. She gripped the railing for support. "Leah, Bruce's voice was gentle, a note of alarm creeping in. "Are you all right?" She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. I remember studying something like this before," she whispered, "but it's all in flashes." He gave a small nod, eyes shining with hope. "That's a start." They moved on, passing tanks of vivid coral reefs and swirling kelp forests. Leah found herself captivated by the mesmerizing grace of an octopus curling through its enclosure. A pang of sadness hit when she realized she might have known all sorts of facts about these creatures, facts her lost memory had swallowed. The day ended with a quiet ride back to the hotel. Leah clutched a souvenir brochure from the aquarium, as if it were a key to unlocking her past. She kept picturing those glowing jellyfish, recalling some mention of a rare discovery. Could that have been the catalyst that changed everything? Once in her room, she sank onto the bed, drained but oddly encouraged. With Dr. Hayes guiding her therapy and Bruce steadfastly at her side, she sensed a door cracking open, a path toward understanding who she really was before it all went dark. It frightened her, yes, but for the first time in years, she dared to hope that there was more to her life than an endless fight for survival in the shadows. Late evening light filtered into the hotel suite, illuminating the pale walls with a gentle glow. Leah sat cross-legged on the carpet, rummaging through her battered notebook. She had started jotting words beside her sketches, fragments of dates, stray recollections, impressions from therapy sessions. Each scribbled note felt like a small victory in her mission to reclaim her identity. Bruce rested nearby, perched on the sofa with a tablet on his lap. Officially, he was reviewing some Auratech documents, but he kept stealing glances at Leah. He marveled at how she managed to look both fragile and determined at once. Shadows still flickered in her eyes, but there was a clarity there he hadn't seen before. She peeked up from her notebook. "You keep saying we're engaged. What was I like?" Her voice carried a quiet tremor. Bruce set the tablet aside, searching for the right words. "You were brilliant," he began softly, "and passionate about marine life, strong-willed. You had this way of lighting up whenever you spoke about the ocean. We'd go to Volunteer Park Conservatory sometimes, just to see the plants and talk about traveling to remote coasts for your research." Leah smiled faintly, as if trying to summon that memory. "It sounds beautiful." He exhaled, carefully choosing his next sentence. "We planned our life together. But then, your boat went missing during an expedition. They found debris but never found." He stopped, swallowing hard. "Well, I spent months searching, hired investigators. Eventually, they said there was no chance you could have survived. I never truly believed it." She noticed the way his hands trembled. This man had grieved her for so long. She stretched her fingers toward him in a small gesture of comfort, her eyes reflecting a sympathy she couldn't fully articulate. His warm hand wrapped gently around hers, and for a moment, the air felt charged with emotion. A knock on the door broke the silence. Eleanor stepped in, offering Leah a gentle smile. "I have some of your things from storage," she said, holding up a box. "We packed them away after we thought you wouldn't return." Leah's heart fluttered nervously. Opening a box of old belongings felt both promising and terrifying. With trembling fingers, she lifted the lid. Inside lay a faded teal scarf, a couple of seashell bracelets, and a small key ring. A wave of familiarity rolled over her. She picked up the scarf, pressing it to her cheek. Images flickered through her mind. An echo of laughter, sunlit water, a sense of excitement about a new research project. She inhaled sharply, tears threatening. I do remember this," she whispered, overwhelmed. Eleanor placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It was your favorite. You wore it constantly while planning that last expedition." Her voice grew gentle. "You spoke endlessly about a discovery you were on the verge of making, something you thought could change the field of marine science." Leah nodded, tears slipping free. This scarf felt like a tangible link to the woman she used to be. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching it as if it were a lifeline. Eleanor exchanged a glance with Bruce. "I hope it helps you remember more." With a brief squeeze of Leah's shoulder, she departed, giving them space. Later, Leah and Bruce settled on the floor, rummaging through the box together. She found a small photo of the two of them smiling on a dock. The weight of lost time settled heavily on them both. Bruce cleared his throat, his voice soft. "I'm sorry you had to live through so much alone," he said. "If I'd known—" She silenced him with a gentle look. "We'll figure it out. Together." The faintest trace of a smile curled her lips. She felt something between them, a comforting warmth she barely understood, but yearned to trust. Nightfall came quietly, and Leah eventually curled up on the bed, the teal scarf in her hands. Outside, raindrops tapped the window. Despite the uncertain path ahead, her heart felt less hollow than it had in years. She couldn't reclaim the past overnight, but as she drifted into a less restless sleep, the idea of piecing her life back together, bit by bit, memory by memory, no longer seemed impossible. Leah found herself at a quiet corner table inside Canlis, a discreet, upscale restaurant where Bruce had suggested they dine to avoid prying eyes. The low-lit ambiance and panoramic windows overlooking Seattle's skyline should have felt enchanting. But instead, Leah's nerves buzzed. She was still adjusting to wearing clean clothes and not worrying about the next meal. A crisp dress Eleanor had provided fit her better than she expected, though she couldn't shake the unease of being in a lavish setting after scraping by on the streets for so long. Across the small table, Bruce studied her with gentle concern. "Is this okay?" he asked softly. "We can leave if it's too much." She managed a tentative smile, fingertips grazing the silverware. "I'm all right. It's just surreal." She glanced around at the hushed conversations, the elegant couples sipping wine, and the distant city lights. A pang of guilt tightened her chest. Part of her felt unworthy, like an imposter. They perused the menu, Leah marveling at dishes she'd never even heard of before. After ordering, Bruce leaned forward, voice lowered. "Eleanor and I have begun some discreet inquiries," he said. "About the accident, the research you were doing, and about Richard Sterling. We're trying to keep it quiet." Leah's hand tensed around her water glass. "Do you really think he might have done something?" The notion that someone played a role in her disappearance unsettled her, but fragments of memory hinted at conflict, jealousy, something amiss. Bruce sighed, reluctance in his eyes. "All I know is Sterling's career skyrocketed shortly after you vanished. He patented discoveries that resembled your notes, and he collected a hefty insurance payout on the research boat that sank." His voice trembled slightly. "It could be coincidence, but I doubt it." Before Leah could respond, the distinct click of polished shoes on hardwood drew her attention. Her gaze flicked across the restaurant, catching sight of a tall man with a composed stride, a man who, even from a distance, exuded confidence and an undercurrent of something else. A chill ran through her. Without knowing how, she recognized him. Richard Sterling. He hadn't spotted them yet, engrossed in conversation with a business associate. Leah's breath hitched. A phantom flicker from her nightmares stabbed into her mind. The silhouette of someone standing near engine controls, a vicious argument muffled by the roar of waves. Her pulse hammered as cold sweat beaded on her forehead. Bruce noticed her distress. "What's wrong?" he whispered urgently. "Sterling," she muttered, barely moving her lips. He followed her gaze, then froze. Tension radiated from him. Carefully, he placed a hand over Leah's, offering reassurance. Sterling drifted closer, and for an agonizing moment, Leah feared he might see her. But just then, his companion beckoned him toward a private dining area. Sterling paused, scanning the restaurant. Leah held her breath, bracing. His gaze swept their corner table briefly. He wore a polite, detached expression. Leah slumped with relief when he moved on without acknowledging them. Perhaps her features were too altered by time and hardship for him to recognize at a glance. Still, her heart pounded like thunder in her ears. She stared at Bruce. I felt this rush of fear, she confessed shakily. Like he's connected to everything that happened to me. But I don't know how. Bruce's jaw clenched. We'll figure it out, he said softly. Just not here. He signaled the waiter and changed their order to takeout, deciding it was best to leave as quickly as possible. Leah couldn't agree more. Back in the car, they both remained silent for a while, the bright glow of the passing streetlights flickering across Leah's face. She kept picturing that fleeting moment when Sterling's gaze swept the room, the vague but chilling certainty that he was dangerous. She glanced at Bruce, who held the steering wheel in a tight grip. Once they reached the hotel, Eleanor was waiting in the lobby. Upon hearing of the encounter, she grew visibly concerned. We need to be extra careful, she warned. If Sterling senses you're alive and investigating, he might try to bury the truth at any cost. Leah's thoughts spun. The notion of returning to the anonymity of the streets flickered in her mind, but she shoved it down. Whether out of anger or determination, she resolved not to let fear drive her anymore. That evening, as she settled into bed, her pulse gradually slowed. Yes, the obstacles ahead were daunting, but she had allies now, Bruce, Eleanor, even Dr. Hayes, and perhaps that made all the difference. A steady rain misted the windows of Eleanor's modest yet tastefully decorated office, situated on the top floor of Oratech's downtown building. Leah sat on a small couch near the window, gazing out at the skyline of Seattle. She was here at Bruce's request, helping sift through a growing pile of documents tied to her old life. Insurance papers, patent filings, and articles from scientific journals. Across a sleek glass desk, Eleanor methodically sorted through folders, occasionally exchanging grave looks with Bruce. According to these records, Eleanor said, tapping a highlighted paragraph, the boat you took on your last expedition had an unusually high insurance policy taken out just days before you disappeared. Sterling's name appears on the documents as an interested party. Leah felt her heart clench. I don't remember signing off on any extra insurance. All I recall from my nightmares is that something catastrophic happened on that vessel. But the details slip away as soon as I wake. Bruce, who was leaning against the desk with his arms folded, exhaled slowly. We have proof that Sterling capitalized on your disappearance. Patents, interviews, sudden promotions. But none of it is airtight evidence of sabotage yet. A knock on the open door drew their attention. John Nelson, a discreet private investigator recommended by Eleanor, stepped inside. In his mid-50s, with a calm demeanor and neatly trimmed grey hair, he looked every bit the seasoned professional. I found something, Nelson announced, laying a slim folder on Eleanor's desk. Richard Sterling filed a set of marine bioresearch patents 6 months after Leah was declared missing. The data in those patents bear a striking resemblance to Leah's documented studies at the University of Washington. Leah's cheeks grew hot with anger, a flicker of memory surfacing. An argument in a cramped lab, someone snatching research notes from her hands. She pressed her fingers to her temple, trying to catch the thread before it vanished. He must have stolen my work. That's the only thing that makes sense. Nelson nodded. It's highly probable. However, suspicion alone won't hold up in a legal confrontation. We need something more concrete, perhaps records hidden away in the university lab or your personal archives, if they still exist. Bruce glanced at Leah. "Do you remember where you kept backups of your research?" She shook her head, frustration knotting her stomach. "Only bits and pieces. I used to store vital documents in a locked cabinet. Sometimes I hid duplicates inside the lab supply closet, behind old textbooks or equipment. It's hazy." Eleanor closed a file with a decisive snap. "Then maybe we should check. Quietly. If we find physical evidence of sabotage or stolen research, Sterling won't be able to slip away." They agreed on a plan. John Nelson would coordinate with Bruce and Eleanor to arrange access to the old lab. Leah would accompany them, hoping that revisiting the location might jolt her memory. Dr. Hayes was on standby to help manage any intense emotional reactions Leah might have. Later that day, after the meeting dispersed, Leah lingered in the office alone for a moment. She gazed again at the rain-soaked city below, heart tumbling with a mix of fear and determination. For so many years, she'd believed she was merely a lost nobody. But these files, these hints of sabotage, proved her life had once been significant. The knowledge both thrilled and terrified her. Bruce returned, stepping close and placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. His voice was soft, but it carried a protective edge. She turned to face him, eyes shining with a fierce spark. "I have to be," she replied. "If he did this, if he let me disappear just to steal my work, then I can't let him get away with it." The rain continued to patter against the glass as they left, a backdrop of persistent rhythm that underscored Leah's tumultuous thoughts. She no longer felt powerless. Fragmented as her memories were, each new clue fortified her resolve. If Sterling had torn her life apart, she was determined to gather every shard and piece them together into the truth, no matter how painful or dangerous it might be. A light drizzle clung to the leaves around the University of Washington campus, creating a delicate sheen on the winding paths. Leah stood outside the old library building, inhaling the scent of ancient books drifting through the open doors. Bruce hovered nearby, quietly observing her. This was their first step in searching for physical evidence, documents, articles, anything that might confirm Sterling's treachery. Inside, the library was hushed, with tall shelves lining the walls. Students typed on laptops, occasionally shooting glances at Leah's small group. John Nelson walked ahead, scanning the directory for research archives. Eleanor, wearing a poised but focused expression, led the way to a special collection section. Leah's heart thudded. She felt a swirl of apprehension, uncertain what they might uncover. A friendly librarian directed them to a corner of the reading room, where older marine biology journals and dissertations were stored. The smell of worn paper and dust transported Leah back in time. She ran her fingers along the spines of bound periodicals, noticing a few familiar titles. Her breath caught as she spotted her own name on the cover of a battered journal from years ago. Marine Bioluminescence. Preliminary Observations by Leah Baxter. Her pulse quickened. She pulled the volume off the shelf, flipping to the article. There it was, her words, her original data, co-authored with Richard Sterling. Seeing it in print tightened her chest. She beckoned Bruce and Eleanor closer, showing them the references and footnotes. "This is the baseline study I did on a new species of glowing plankton," she murmured. "Sterling was just an assistant then." John Nelson read over her shoulder. "This could be crucial. If his later patents derive from these findings without proper credit, it shows intent." Leah's fingers trembled. "There should be more. I published a follow-up the year I vanished." She scanned the shelves again, discovering another bound volume. Flipping through it, she found the references to a planned expedition that matched the date of her final journey. More than anything, it confirmed that she'd been on the brink of a major discovery. She glanced at Bruce, who gently squeezed her shoulder. "Keep these references in mind. Eleanor said, snapping photos with her phone. We can compare them to Sterling's patents. Let's gather everything we can. They spent the next hour combing through archives, copying references, and speaking quietly with the librarian about older storage rooms. Leah's mind buzzed with each rediscovered note, each mention of experimental data she'd once championed. She remembered flickers of intense excitement, the rush of believing her research could change marine biology. On their way out, Leah paused by a large window overlooking a campus courtyard. A memory seized her. She and Sterling walking these very halls, him pressing her to share more about her data. She recalled how uneasy she'd felt. His interest seemed almost obsessive. The recollection made her stomach twist. She looked at Bruce, voice unsteady. He was jealous of my progress. I remember him suggesting we patent the findings before I finalized them, but I refused. I wanted more tests, more peer review. He kept pushing me. Bruce's jaw tightened, and not long after, you vanished. John Nelson cleared his throat. This definitely supports the theory that Sterling orchestrated something. But we still need a smoking gun. Evidence he physically tampered with the boat or manipulated the insurance. As they exited the library, the drizzle had become a steady rain. Leah clutched her folder of copied articles like a shield. A crack of thunder made her flinch. She was no stranger to storms, but a knot of anxiety lingered whenever lightning flashed. The sensation reminded her of the boat nightmares, thrashing waves, sudden flashes of brightness, an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Standing at the campus steps, gazing at the scurrying students below, Leah felt a strange mix of grief and pride. She belonged here once. As a promising scientist, Sterling had stolen her future, or so he believed, but now, inch by inch, she was reclaiming it. Bruce opened an umbrella and shielded her from the worst of the downpour. "You okay?" he asked softly. Leah exhaled, nodding. "I'm getting there. I want to find whatever it takes to bring him down." From an upper-level window, a silhouette disappeared behind a curtain. Unnoticed by the group, a pair of eyes had watched them collect their clues. Somewhere on campus, a phone rang, a quiet warning that Leah's return was far more threatening than Sterling had ever anticipated. Anxiety pressed heavy on Leah's chest as she sat across from Dr. Evelyn Hayes in the familiar, softly lit therapy room. The day's earlier discoveries at the university had reawakened old traumas, their edges cutting deeper than before. She couldn't shake the relentless flashes of memory. A boat deck, slick with water, the sense of someone standing behind her, and the deafening crack of something metallic. Dr. Hayes regarded her with steady compassion. "You've uncovered more about your past. How does that feel?" Leah drew a shaky breath. "Like I'm peeling back a bandage that's fused to my skin. Every new piece of information hurts, but I need to keep going." Dr. Hayes nodded. "It's common for the process of remembering to bring emotional turmoil. You've suppressed these events for a long time. Your mind protected you by creating amnesia." She paused. "Do you recall any specific details about Sterling's involvement that day on the boat?" Leah closed her eyes, sifting through the tangled images. "Just an argument. I sense hostility. I was excited about data I'd collected, some bioluminescent samples. Sterling was furious I wouldn't let him handle the shipping or the patent forms yet. That's all I see, his anger, the waves, a sudden explosion of noise." Her throat constricted. "After that, nothing, darkness." Dr. Hayes offered a reassuring look. "You're making progress, but remember, you set the pace. Take care not to force yourself into panic." After the session, Bruce met Leah in the medical center's lobby. One glance at her tired eyes, and he slipped an arm around her shoulders. "Let's get some fresh air," he suggested softly. They walked outside to a small garden area near the entrance. Grey clouds hovered low, threatening rain once more, but the crisp air offered a momentary calm. "It's getting worse," she admitted, folding her arms protectively. "Every time I learn something new about that day, it's like a blade twisting inside me." He paused, searching her face. "We can slow down if you need to. There's no rush." Leah shook her head. "I appreciate it, but I can't let Sterling roam free, thinking he got away with it, and I need closure." Her eyes flickered with resolve. "I won't find peace until I know exactly what happened." That evening, they retreated to the hotel, where Eleanor and John Nelson awaited them with updates. Marcus, now discreetly living in a small staff lodging the hotel manager had arranged, joined them too. Leah felt a surge of gratitude seeing the weathered older man, who once shared the hardships of street life with her, now standing in a warm, well-lit suite like a welcome friend. Nelson spread out fresh printouts on the table. "I've unearthed records showing that Sterling claimed an accident at sea cost him valuable research equipment. The insurance payout was significant, but there's an inconsistency. The vessel's manifest lists certain experimental devices that never appeared in the official salvage report." Leah perched on the edge of the couch, pressing her palm over the star-shaped scar. "You're saying those devices might have been removed before the boat sank, or destroyed," Nelson clarified. "We can't be certain yet, but it suggests the possibility Sterling tampered with the vessel. If he planned for it to go down, he might have taken what he needed first." Bruce's jaw tightened. He robbed Leah of her research and her life as she knew it. A silence fell. Leah gazed at the small group. People who cared, who believed her. Though her memories were fractured, their support felt solid, yet an undercurrent of fear rippled beneath her determination. Sterling wasn't just an unscrupulous colleague. He was a man who might do anything to keep his stolen legacy intact. Marcus touched her shoulder gently. "You have us now, kiddo. You're not alone." She swallowed hard, fighting the sting of tears. Outside, heavy rain began to spatter against the windows, each drop like a distant echo of the storm she'd survived. She couldn't recall every detail of her near-death ordeal, but she knew she'd endured it once, emerging battered and lost. Now, armed with allies and fragments of the truth, she was ready to face the submerged pain head-on, even if it meant risking everything to shine a light on Richard Sterling's darkest secrets. Sunlight had finally broken through Seattle's persistent cloud cover, bathing Olympic Sculpture Park in a fleeting glow. Leah often retreated here for quiet walks, hoping the open-air sculptures and sweeping waterfront views would ease her mounting anxiety. Today, however, her thoughts churned in restless loops about Sterling and the partial memories that plagued her sleep. She wandered alone along the gravel path, hugging her jacket tighter. The wind off the Puget Sound carried a faint chill, rustling the tall sculptures looming overhead. She paused near a bright red metal installation shaped like an abstract eagle, gazing absently at the water beyond. Footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her. When she turned, her pulse spiked. Richard Sterling stood a few yards away, dressed in a sharp overcoat, his posture unnaturally relaxed. A subtle tension radiated from him, as though he were a predator sizing up prey. Leah's breath caught in her throat. "You've resurfaced," he said evenly, voice low. "I heard whispers, but I wasn't sure I believed it." Leah's grip on her jacket tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but she forced herself to stand her ground. "You—" Her voice faltered, images of the boat crash swirling in her mind. "You ruined my life," she managed, a tremor in her tone. Sterling's eyes flickered, but his lips curved in a disingenuous smile. "That's a strong accusation. Seems you've been listening to the wrong people, or dredging up false memories." Her heart hammered. "They're not false. I remember you. I remember your anger, how you pushed me about patents I refused to sign. I remember." She broke off, sweat beading on her forehead. "Careful." He took a slow step forward, lowering his voice. "You can accuse me of many things, but I'm a man of influence now. If you stir trouble, you'll find it's not pleasant. The sea can be unpredictable, wouldn't you agree?" His words dripped with veiled menace. Leah's mouth went dry. She glanced around. No one else was near enough to hear. Suddenly, the park felt deserted despite its wide, open space. She stood rooted, torn between standing firm and the impulse to run. Sterling arched an eyebrow. "You have a second chance at life, Leah. I suggest you don't squander it by poking into matters that should remain buried." Her voice, though shaky, found a sliver of courage. "I'm not burying anything anymore, and I'm not alone this time." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Bruce Bell, I presume, and that meddling sister of his. They won't protect you forever. People lose fortunes over defamation lawsuits. Or accidents happen." His smugness seared itself into her memory. A wave of dread engulfed Leah, memories colliding violently in her mind, the rocking of the boat, hearing a metallic snap, the acrid smell of smoke. She realized she was trembling. Sterling noted it, his own confidence swelling. Then, like a lifeline, her phone buzzed in her pocket. The noise jolted her enough to break eye contact. Taking a breath, she stepped back. "I'm done with you," she snapped, forcing a glare. "Stay away from me." He offered a faint laugh. "We'll see," he said, turning on his heel. Within seconds, he strode off, disappearing around a curved path. Leah stood there, breath ragged, clenching her fists until her nails bit her palms. Her phone kept buzzing. She fumbled it out and saw Bruce's name on the screen. Heart pounding, she answered with a shaky voice. "Hey, where are you?" he asked, concern evident. "I've been trying to reach you. Dr. Hayes wanted to schedule an urgent therapy session. Your nightmares are intensifying, right?" Leah's gaze darted to the spot where Sterling vanished. "I'm at Olympic Sculpture Park. Sterling was here." She swallowed hard, her voice tight. "He threatened me, Bruce. He all but confirmed he'd do anything to stop us." Silence on the other end. Then Bruce's tone hardened. "Stay put. I'm coming." The line clicked off. Leah leaned against the sculpture, pulse thudding like a drum. Every fiber in her being quivered with alarm. Sterling's cold eyes haunted her. She sensed, with bone-deep certainty, that he wouldn't hesitate to act on his threats. The sun gleamed overhead, but an icy dread settled into her core, as if the storm clouds of her past had returned to blot out any trace of light. Leah clutched a crumpled piece of paper in her trembling hands, staring at the words she'd just written. A goodbye note to Bruce. Rain drummed against the window of her hotel room, the rhythm echoing the frantic pace of her thoughts. She was about to do the one thing she'd vowed never to do again: run. She replayed Sterling's threat repeatedly in her head, the venom in his tone chilling her. If he was willing to sabotage a boat and leave her for dead 15 years ago, what might he do now that she was alive and asking questions? But the worst fear gnawing at her was that Bruce or Eleanor, or Marcus, or anyone else trying to help, could become collateral damage. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Leah stiffened, expecting a knock at any moment. She couldn't bear to face them, not now. She clutched the note tighter, making sure her message was clear. "I have to protect you. If I stay, Sterling will hurt us all. Don't come looking for me." Her heart broke as she folded it, leaving it on the neatly made bed. The sense of déjà vu overwhelmed her. Fleeing felt like the streets all over again, but this time she had a reason beyond her own safety. She was convinced that by disappearing, she might shield Bruce from Sterling's escalating threats. Grabbing her old backpack, she stuffed a change of clothes and the battered notebook inside. She took one last look at the comforting warmth of the hotel room, the place where she'd begun to rebuild herself. A pang of loss cut through her, but she pushed it aside. In the lobby, she kept her head down, hood pulled over her damp hair. She was grateful for the evening gloom and the subdued lighting. Darting past the reception desk, she stepped into the storm-swept streets. The cold drizzle stung her cheeks. Every inhale tasted of damp pavement and fear. She had nowhere to go, but anywhere was safer than staying and risking Bruce's life. She walked for blocks, rain soaking through her jacket and hair plastering to her forehead. Memories of that harrowing confrontation with Sterling at the park fueled her desperation. She pictured him lurking, waiting to crush her and anyone she cared about. Her star-shaped scar seemed to throb in response, a grim reminder of what she'd already lost. Eventually, she found herself in a dimly lit alley near Pike Place Market, the same general area she once called home. As if on cue, she spotted Marcus hunched under a metal awning, rummaging through a battered plastic bag. He noticed her approach and paused, eyes widening with concern. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice tinged with worry. "I thought you were done with this life." She shivered, hugging her backpack to her chest. I had to leave. Things got too dangerous." Her gaze darted away, unable to meet his puzzled stare. Marcus shook his head slowly. "Did something happen with Bruce? He was good to you, Leah." Her eyes stung with tears. "That's exactly why I left. Sterling, he threatened him, threatened all of us." She bit her lip, trembling. "I can't let them get hurt. I can't let Bruce go through another nightmare because of me." Marcus frowned. "Hiding out here won't solve anything, you know that." Leah swallowed hard, shoulders sagging. On some level, she realized he was right. Yet the memory of Sterling's cold gaze held her in thrall. "It'll keep them safe," she insisted, though her voice wavered. A rumble of thunder rippled across the sky. Marcus motioned for her to step under the awning. "At least get out of the rain. You look half frozen." Grateful for the faint kindness, Leah crouched beside him. She felt as though she were rewinding to her old existence, haunted, alone, determined to disappear for others' sake. Yet guilt gnawed at her. She thought of Bruce's gentle smile, Eleanor's unwavering support, the progress she'd made in therapy. Was she destroying all that by fleeing? For now, fear smothered her second thoughts. The shadows of the alley closed around them. The rain's incessant patter overhead, a stark reminder that her life had come full circle. She was back in hiding, back to surviving moment to moment. If it protected Bruce from Sterling's wrath, perhaps it was worth it, even if it tore her heart to pieces. Leah clutched the thin blanket Marcus had offered and huddled with him beneath a dilapidated overhang not far from Pike Place Market. The cold night air gnawed at her exposed skin, but her internal turmoil felt more biting than the wind. She had been here for 2 days, refusing to tell Bruce or Eleanor where she was. Her note of farewell had surely left them worried or furious, maybe both, but she'd been convinced this was the only way to keep them safe. Now, listening to the soft patter of nighttime drizzle, Leah realized she wasn't as certain anymore. In truth, the fear that Sterling might hurt Bruce if she stayed by his side still hovered at the edge of her thoughts. But living on the streets again reminded her of the helplessness she'd barely escaped. She remembered how it felt to starve, to sleep with one eye open, haunted by nightmares of an unknown past. Did she really want to return to that existence? Beside her, Marcus shifted, sliding a cup of lukewarm coffee in her direction. "You've barely said a word, kid," he said gently. Lines of concern etched across his weathered face. "I know you think you're protecting them, but this isn't living." She drew the blanket tighter, guilt churning in her chest. "If Sterling caught wind of me going after him, he'd come for them," she whispered. "I won't let that happen." Marcus tilted his head, in silent empathy. You really believe running is the only way? Leah fiddled with the hem of her jacket. She didn't want to admit how torn she felt. On one hand, her protective instincts screamed that distance was necessary. On the other, she recalled the desperation in Bruce's eyes each time he encouraged her to keep fighting. She also remembered the progress she'd made under Dr. Hayes's care, the healing that had begun to restore her sense of self. "I'm tired, Marcus," she murmured. "Tired of the fear, the shadows, all of it." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've come a long way, Leah. You're not the same terrified woman I met months ago. You have allies, real allies." She stared at the coffee, swirling it absently. For the first time since she'd fled, she considered the possibility that her presence might not be a curse. Perhaps leaving Bruce had hurt him more than it had saved him. Her eyes stung at the thought. "I don't know what to do." Marcus straightened. "Maybe start by calling him. See if he's okay. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for your own peace of mind." Leah weighed the suggestion. The idea of hearing Bruce's voice again filled her with both comfort and dread. Sterling's threat replayed in her mind. The sea can be treacherous, but her heart insisted that if she truly wanted to stop living in fear, she couldn't hide forever. She glanced around at the alley. A puddle reflected her faint silhouette, stirring a memory of the battered reflection she'd once seen nightly in these same streets. Living like this again wouldn't guarantee Bruce's safety. It would only guarantee her isolation. Sterling could still find ways to lash out. And Bruce, he deserved at least a goodbye spoken to his face, not just a scribbled note. With trembling hands, she retrieved the cheap cell phone Bruce had provided, still miraculously charged. After a moment's hesitation, she pressed his contact name. Her heart pounded with every ring. On the third ring, a voice crackled through. "Leah!" Bruce sounded half breathless, as if he'd sprinted to grab the phone. Relief and alarm blended in his tone. Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm okay," she managed. I'm sorry I ran. I'm sorry for everything." A pause, then a tight exhale. "Don't be sorry, just come back, please." In that simple plea, she heard exhaustion, longing, and unwavering commitment. She swallowed hard, glancing at Marcus for moral support. He gave her a nod of encouragement. "I want to," she whispered into the phone, "but I need to be sure we're safe." His voice softened, trembling with restrained emotion. "We can figure it out together. Just let me help you." Leah closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. In that instant, she realized she was done running. Sterling might still be out there, a formidable threat, but she'd reached a breaking point. She had to rise above her fear, or remain a captive of it forever. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll come back." Marcus laid a comforting hand on her arm as she ended the call. The tension coiled inside her chest, unwound just a little. Though uncertainty still lingered, for the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. She was no longer just surviving the streets. She was choosing to face whatever came next. The following morning, Leah stood in the hotel suite she had abandoned, heart hammering as Bruce held her in a hesitant embrace. She'd expected anger, but all she saw in his eyes was pure relief. Eleanor emerged from an adjoining room, phone in hand, as if she'd been mid-conversation. She froze at the sight of Leah, then hurried over, expression caught between worry and exasperation. "You're back," Eleanor said, voice thick with unspoken emotion. "Thank goodness." Leah managed a shaky nod, guilt gnawing at her. "I'm sorry," she repeated, quieter this time. Eleanor cut her off with a gentle hand on her arm. "It's all right. You're safe now." She gestured to the pile of documents strewn across the table. "We've been busy." Bruce gently guided Leah to a seat. Nelson found more leads. There's a chance the old lab at the University of Washington still holds a compartment with some hidden backup data. You mentioned once you had a special place to keep your notes safe. A flicker of recognition sparked in Leah's mind. Yes, she had once kept crucial backups in an unlabeled compartment near the back of the lab. She'd half forgotten that detail. Her pulse quickened at the idea of returning to the exact site where her downfall began, but something in her chest felt resolute. "We need that evidence," she said firmly. "If it's still there, it could prove everything, my research, Sterling's sabotage, all of it." Eleanor exchanged a glance with Bruce. "We'll go tonight, after hours. A friend in the university's administration owes me a favor. He's agreed to look the other way, as long as we keep this under wraps." That evening, a chill wind swept the empty corridors of the Marine Science Building. Leah, Bruce, Eleanor, and John Nelson made their way through the deserted hallways, guided by the faint glow of emergency lights. Memories assailed Leah, the hum of the lab equipment, the tangy scent of brine solutions, and the excitement she'd once felt about her pioneering study on bioluminescent organisms. Now, those corridors felt haunted, the silence oppressive. A single flashlight beam illuminated the door to the old lab, which had been left unused after her disappearance. Layers of dust coated the windows. Eleanor jiggled the key they'd been given, and the lock clicked open. The space beyond smelled stale, the air tinged with the faint odor of chemicals. Old desks and counters stood like silent witnesses to the tragedy that had transpired years ago. "Over here," Leah murmured, stepping cautiously to the back corner. At the far end stood a metal cabinet, heavier than the others, with a panel behind it that she vaguely recalled sliding off once upon a time. Nelson helped shift the cabinet, revealing a narrow gap in the wall. Her heart pounded. Could the hidden notes still be intact? She reached into the gap, carefully feeling around. Her fingers brushed something thin and plastic, taped to the inside. Gently, she pulled out a weathered file folder with several data storage devices sealed in a waterproof pouch. Dust motes danced in the flashlight's glow as she stared at the find, hands shaking. Bruce's eyes shone with exhilaration. This could be it. Just then, footsteps echoed outside the lab. Everyone froze, exchanging alarmed looks. Eleanor quickly switched off the flashlight. In the darkness, Leah could hear her own ragged breathing. Who else would be here at this hour? A faint beam of light sliced through the crack under the door. The knob rattled as someone tried to open it. Leah clutched the file folder to her chest. Her mind reeled. Had Sterling been tipped off? Anxiety hammered in her ears. John Nelson gestured for them to remain silent, easing toward the door. After a tense moment, the door rattling stopped. The footsteps retreated, fading down the hallway. Leah's pulse still throbbed, adrenaline surging. She exhaled in relief when the building fell quiet once more. "That was too close," Eleanor whispered, flicking the flashlight back on. "We need to go. Now." Cradling the folder of evidence, Leah nodded, a fierce resolve coursing through her veins. She had come face to face with her past, reclaiming the physical proof Sterling had stolen. Whoever had tried to intercept them tonight, they hadn't succeeded. And that meant Leah finally had the upper hand in the fight for truth. 2 days later, the hush inside the King County Courthouse lobby buzzed with an undercurrent of tension and media anticipation. Leah stood at a polished wooden railing, posture rigid. She wore a conservative blazer Eleanor had picked out, her hair neatly pulled back. Cameras weren't allowed inside the courtroom, but the press clamored beyond the doors, each hoping for a statement about the sensational reappearance of Leah Baxter, the marine biologist once presumed dead. Sterling's arrest had been swift. The data discovered in the old lab confirmed Leah's rightful research ownership, and a deeper investigation revealed fraudulent insurance claims connected to the lost vessel. Under mounting pressure, local authorities executed a warrant. Now, The preliminary hearing was underway, with testimonies from Leah, Bruce, and John Nelson. Leah's stomach knotted, replaying the moment Sterling was taken into custody. He had sneered at her, resentment burning in his eyes, but the handcuffs around his wrists were proof that justice might finally prevail. Inside the courtroom, a judge presided over the formal reading of charges: sabotage, attempted murder, pending further evidence, grand larceny and fraud. Leah tried to focus on the proceedings, but her pulse roared in her ears each time she glimpsed Sterling sitting at the defense table, flanked by expensive attorneys. He avoided her gaze, but she could sense his simmering fury. When her turn came to testify, she steadied her trembling hands. The prosecution attorney guided her through questions about her research, her disappearance, and her partial amnesia. She recounted the feeling of betrayal, the boat accident, and Sterling's suspicious rise afterward. Though tears pricked her eyes, she spoke with a conviction fueled by pain and determination. The data from the hidden backup strongly supported her claims. The legal team produced reams of evidence, matching patent dates, insurance inconsistencies, and forensic proof that the boat's engine was tampered with. Finally, Leah stepped down from the stand, legs shaking. Bruce offered a supportive nod from a seat nearby. He too had testified about how he searched for her relentlessly and watched Sterling profit from her demise. Eleanor had provided records from Oratech's investigators. Dr. Hayes, though not present in court, had filed an affidavit confirming Leah's trauma and memory recovery. By early afternoon, the judge announced there was sufficient cause to proceed with a full criminal trial. The defense scrambled, filing motions for dismissal that were swiftly denied. Sterling was led out in cuffs, his expression twisted with outrage. Leah stared after him, her heart pounding. For the first time, she truly believed he would face the consequences of his actions. Later, as the group exited the courthouse, a wave of reporters rushed forward, cameras flashing. Bruce shielded Leah with his arm, guiding her to a waiting car. Dozens of questions fired. Where had Leah been all these years? Did she harbor ill will toward Sterling? Would she press additional charges? She only shook her head, overwhelmed. Once safely inside the vehicle, she let out a long, trembling breath. Eleanor, sitting in the front seat, glanced back with a gentle smile. "You did great. The evidence is solid. This is the beginning of justice." Leah nodded, exhaustion etching lines around her eyes. "I never thought I'd see this day," she admitted, voice wobbling. I can't believe it's actually happening." Back at the hotel, Marcus was there to greet them in the lobby, grinning widely. He'd kept track of the hearing through online updates. When Leah recounted what happened, he patted her shoulder, eyes warm with pride. "Told you you weren't alone in this." Upstairs in the suite, Bruce insisted on celebrating in a quiet, intimate way. He ordered room service, steaming bowls of soup, fresh bread, and a small bottle of champagne. Leah found herself laughing softly at the simplicity of it. Sitting on the couch, sipping from a delicate flute, she felt relief flood her system. The weight of years of suffering had begun to ease. She caught her reflection in the mirror, the faint scar above her eyebrow, the star-shaped mark on her wrist. They no longer felt like brands of shame, but symbols of survival. Leaning against Bruce, she whispered, "I'm finally free, aren't I?" He pulled her closer, voice thick with emotion. "Yes, you are." In that quiet moment, hearing the distant hum of city traffic outside, Leah let herself believe it was true. They had forced Sterling into the light, stripped him of his lies. While there was still a trial ahead, the cracks in her world were healing. She felt newly reconciled with herself, her identity no longer a fractured puzzle, but something close to whole. Leah stood at the front gates of the University of Washington campus, heart fluttering as she took in the familiar sights. Students bustled about, some with backpacks slung over their shoulders, others hurrying to classes. The crisp morning air hinted at possibility. After weeks of legal battles and emotional upheavals, she was here for a more personal reason, reclaiming her academic credentials and seeing if her status as a researcher could be formally reinstated. Bruce walked beside her, his hand briefly brushing hers in silent support. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She inhaled and nodded. They made their way toward the administration building, passing banners advertising upcoming symposiums. It struck her how much had changed since she last roamed these paths, yet how the essence of the campus remained the same. A swirl of emotions rose in her chest, nostalgia, excitement, and a lingering trepidation that she might not fit in anymore. Inside, they were directed to an office where a representative from the School of Oceanography awaited. Professor Harris, her former mentor, was seated behind a broad wooden desk. The man's face lit up at the sight of her, though his features were etched with years she hadn't witnessed. Leah had vague memories of his patient guidance and fatherly concern when she was a young researcher, brimming with ideas. "Leah," he greeted, rising to shake her hand. "I'm so relieved and astonished to see you again under these circumstances. I've followed your case closely. Must have been quite the ordeal." She blinked back emotion. "It's been intense," she admitted. "I'm hoping I can retrieve any records or transcripts I need to confirm my status and maybe, eventually, return to research." Professor Harris gestured for her and Bruce to sit. "We'll do everything we can. Your prior publications, your graduate thesis, and your records are still on file, though some were listed under deceased. We'll sort that out. The university is open to reinstating you, provided you complete a review process to update your credentials and demonstrate any continuing education needed, but we'd be thrilled to have your expertise back, especially considering the trial's revelations about your groundbreaking work." Leah's breath caught. "You mean I could truly come back?" Harris nodded emphatically. "Yes, once the legal matters settle and the academic board reviews your situation, we'll gladly restore your standing. You might need a refresher or collaboration with current projects, but your foundational knowledge and your passion are still yours." A surge of gratitude and relief washed over Leah. So many nights she'd huddled in the cold, believing she was nobody. Now, she was on the verge of reclaiming the identity she'd fought so hard to piece together. She glanced at Bruce, who wore a proud smile. As they left the administration building, the sun peeked through a blanket of clouds, illuminating the campus walkways. Leah closed her eyes, soaking in the sense of renewal. For years, she'd been living in limbo, haunted by an unfinished past. Today, she felt the beginnings of closure. In the afternoon, they met with Eleanor, who had new updates. She spread out some papers on a cafe table near the campus. "The trial date is set for Sterling," she said. "He's out on bail, but heavily monitored. The prosecutors want your final statement about the sabotage and stolen research. They believe it'll cinch the case." Leah sipped her tea, absorbing the news. The notion of facing Sterling again, even in court, twisted her stomach. But after everything he'd done, nearly robbing her of her life, identity and future, she was determined to see it through. "I won't back down," she promised softly. "Not now." Eleanor smiled, relief evident in her eyes. "Good. You're stronger than you realize, Leah." Before they parted ways, Leah paused near a reflecting pool, leaning over to see her own face. A few months ago, she might have recoiled. But now she felt a flicker of pride in how far she'd come. Her scars, her re-emerging path, the future that once seemed forever lost. She wasn't fully healed, nor was she without fear. But for the first time, she saw the reflection of a woman who had fought her way from darkness guided by love, and found a foothold in the life she was meant to live. With a final look around the campus that had once been her playground of ideas, she walked forward, hand in Bruce's, toward the next chapter of her journey, wherever it might lead. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Bruce's waterfront condo. Sparkling on the calm waters of the Puget Sound just outside, Leah stood in the living room, surveying the cozy space with soft beige walls and modern furniture. A few moving boxes were scattered about, some filled with Leah's newly retrieved belongings, others with old mementos from Bruce's life before her reappearance. "I can't believe you found a place with this view," Leah murmured, stepping closer to the tall glass doors that opened onto a small balcony. The water stretched out, reflecting the sky in swathes of blue and pale gold. She couldn't help but think of how, for so long, the ocean symbolized loss. Now, it felt like a portal to new beginnings. Bruce shrugged, a playful smile crossing his face. "I needed to look at something that reminded me of you every day. The sea. It's always been a part of who you are." His tone held a gentle reverence. "I want you to feel at home here." Leah turned, heart swelling with gratitude. She marveled at how drastically her life had changed in such a short span. Days ago, she'd been crouched in an alley, convinced that running was her only option. Now, she was on the verge of building a home with Bruce in a place bathed in sunlight and promise. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. Eleanor entered, followed by Marcus. Eleanor carried a stack of documents in a folder, while Marcus had a small potted plant in his hands. "A housewarming gift," he said sheepishly, offering Leah the plant. "It's a little succulent, hardy, low maintenance, kind of like you." He winked, and she laughed, accepting it gratefully. Eleanor opened the folder. "I have updates on both ends. The social initiative Bruce wanted to start at Oratech for homeless outreach is moving forward, and the board's excited to link it with your upcoming foundation on ethical marine research. They're even discussing a scholarship in your name for women in science." Leah's eyes glistened. "A scholarship? I don't know what to say," Marcus grinned. "Say you'll keep inspiring folks like you always have. Maybe you just didn't know it." Sinking onto a plush couch, Leah flipped through the proposal Eleanor handed her. It outlined a plan to support local shelters, places much like where Leah could have found refuge if she'd been ready, and to fund advanced oceanography studies at the University of Washington. The thought that her tragedy could blossom into meaningful change for others felt profoundly moving. A few minutes later, the group gathered around the kitchen island, munching on sandwiches and sharing stories. They reminisced about Leah's first days back, the terror and uncertainty that had gradually morphed into determination. Bruce described how, after years of building a corporate empire, he finally felt he was putting his success to truly good use. "You taught me that," he said softly, meeting Leah's gaze. "You reminded me why I wanted to change the world in the first place." Marcus cracked a teasing grin. "And here I was, thinking you'd given up your soul to spreadsheets." Laughter rippled through the room, a sound of pure relief. Leah placed a hand over the star-shaped scar on her wrist, remembering how it had once been a reminder of tragedy. Now it felt like a badge of endurance. The road ahead wasn't entirely smooth. Sterling's trial still loomed, and her emotional scars wouldn't vanish overnight. But the bitterness of the past was tempered by the sense of purpose that had taken root. Later, Leah and Bruce slipped out to the balcony, leaving Eleanor and Marcus chatting in the living room. The soft breeze ruffled Leah's hair as she stood by the railing, staring out at the Puget Sound. A gentle hush settled over the water, and seagulls circled lazily overhead. "I feel at peace here," she admitted, voice tinged with wonder. Bruce leaned in, brushing a tender kiss to her temple. "Welcome home," he murmured. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." She exhaled slowly, letting the serenity of the moment wash over her. The final rays of afternoon sun bathed them both in a warm glow, as if nature itself bestowed a blessing on their shared journey. This condo by the water felt less like a mere residence and more like a symbolic gateway, a portal to new dreams rising on the horizon, buoyed by the enduring power of love and truth. Leah stood backstage at the University of Washington's largest lecture hall, heart pounding against her ribcage. Through a narrow gap in the heavy curtain, she glimpsed rows of seats quickly filling with students, faculty, and curious onlookers. Her throat felt dry. She'd accepted an invitation to speak about both her scientific work and her personal journey, an event that had grown into a campus-wide highlight. She never imagined her quiet return would spark so much interest. Bruce offered a supportive smile from the wings, while Eleanor checked last-minute details with the event coordinator. Marcus hovered nearby, looking slightly out of place in a button-up shirt, but determined to be there for her, Doctor. Evelyn Hayes stood a few feet away, arms folded gently as she studied Leah with a calm, encouraging expression. "Ready?" Dr. Hayes asked softly. Leah took a steadying breath. "As I'll ever be." She recalled the night she'd lain awake on a damp sidewalk, haunted by shattered memories and a sense of irreparable loss. Now, she prepared to address an audience hungry for insight into the woman who had once been a rising star in marine biology, presumed dead, and then returned under sensational circumstances. Her mind flickered with doubts. Did she truly have something worthwhile to say? An assistant signaled from the stage. Her heart gave a final, anxious flutter, and she stepped forward into the spotlight. The bright overhead lights made her blink. She cleared her throat, the hush in the hall magnifying every sound. "Good evening," she began, voice trembling at first. "My name is Leah Baxter, and for a long time I had no idea who I was." A ripple of hushed attention passed through the crowd. She continued, hands loosely gripping the podium. "I loved the ocean for as long as I can remember. Marine biology was my passion, and I was close to discovering something extraordinary when my life took a devastating turn. 15 years vanished in a single day for me. An accident, sabotage, really, stole my memories and my future." She paused, letting the weight of that statement sink in. Faces in the audience reflected concern and curiosity. Bruce, in the front row, watched with encouraging eyes, his hands clasped tightly. Leah drew courage from the warmth in his expression. "In the time I lost, Richard Sterling patented research that was rightfully mine," she said, her voice stronger now. "He tried to hide the truth by allowing the world to believe I was gone forever." A subdued murmur rippled across the lecture hall. But with the help of allies, my fiancé, Bruce Bell, my friend Marcus, my therapist, Dr. Hayes, and many of you at this university, I began to regain both my memories and my will to keep fighting. She described her early explorations of bioluminescent marine species, the passion driving her to uncover new data that might revolutionize ecological understanding. Then she shifted into recounting her homelessness, the amnesia, and how she reclaimed her identity step by step. Each word came more naturally than the last, and by the time she neared her closing thoughts, the tension in her shoulders eased. "The ocean, for me, has been both a home and a harbinger of nightmares. But I've learned that darkness can be illuminated with perseverance, with the unwavering support of those who refuse to give up on you, even when you've given up on yourself." She took a slow, deliberate breath. "To anyone who feels they've lost their place or their voice, know that it's never truly gone. It can be rediscovered, piece by piece, if you keep reaching out." Silence draped the hall for a heartbeat. Then applause rose in waves. Leah blinked, momentarily overwhelmed by the standing ovation, her chest constricted with emotion, relief, gratitude, and an unexpected flood of pride. Stepping back from the podium, she saw Dr. Hayes dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, while Bruce clapped vigorously, a broad smile lighting his face. She exited the stage on shaking legs, yet a profound sense of accomplishment filled her. People in the crowd, professors, fellow researchers, strangers, reached out to shake her hand or offer quiet words of admiration. For so long, she'd believed her voice was lost. Now, she realized it had only been waiting to be heard again. In that stirring applause, Leah felt a new beginning take shape. Her tragedy had transformed into a testament, and her voice, once silenced, had finally found its audience, igniting hope that even after unthinkable darkness, one could rise to inspire others. An uneasy hush settled over the King County Superior Court as Leah prepared to give her final statement in the criminal trial against Richard Sterling. Months of investigations had led to this pivotal moment. The media buzzed with curiosity outside, and Leah felt their scrutiny like a heat lamp. Even though cameras weren't permitted inside the courtroom, she slid into the witness chair, recalling the confidence she'd felt at the university lecture. Now, that confidence warred with fresh nerves. Sterling, seated at the defense table, wore a tailored suit and a tight-lipped sneer. His legal team exchanged whispered remarks, casting occasional disapproving glances at Leah and the prosecution. Judge Adams, a middle-aged woman with a measured tone, called for order. The prosecution's lead attorney rose. "Ms. Baxter," he said, "we understand you'd like to add a final statement regarding the impact of Mr. Sterling's actions on your life. Please proceed." Leah inhaled shakily and began, her voice tremulous at first. "I lost more than my memories that day on the boat. I lost my career, my relationships, my sense of self. The sabotage orchestrated by Richard Sterling was not just about a boat sinking. It was about stealing my research and leaving me to drown, literally and figuratively." She swallowed, looking directly at Sterling. "He robbed me of 15 years. I was left homeless, wandering the streets with partial amnesia, never knowing why my nightmares haunted me." Her gaze flicked to the jury box, where 12 solemn faces watched. "I don't seek revenge, but I demand accountability. If Mr. Sterling is found guilty, I ask that the court acknowledge not only the financial crimes, but the human cost of his choices. What he did was cruel and calculated, risking my life for profit." A hush filled the courtroom. Even the distant shuffle of paperwork seemed to pause. Leah's heart hammered, but she pressed on. "Despite everything, I regained my memories, my voice, and my passion. I trust this court to ensure Mr. Sterling can't do to anyone else what he did to me." As she finished, Judge Adams thanked her. Leah stepped down, nerves jangling. She returned to her seat beside Bruce, who squeezed her hand in silent support. Across the aisle, Sterling's lawyers avoided eye contact, reviewing their notes. Soon the defense called their own final witness, an expert claiming Sterling had no motive to harm Leah, but the testimony felt hollow compared to the trove of evidence stacked against him. When closing arguments began, the prosecution emphasized the pattern of Sterling's fraud, the false insurance claim, the stolen patents, and the suspicious timing of Leah's disappearance. Leah watched Sterling's expression tighten with each damning detail. Occasionally, he shifted in his seat, rolling his shoulders as though they were burdened by a weight he couldn't shake off. At last, the jury filed out to deliberate. The tension in the courtroom soared. Hours stretched into the remainder of the day, and then the next morning. During that waiting period, Leah and Bruce paced the corridors, trying to stave off anxiety. Reporters approached with microphones, but Leah politely declined to comment. She had said all she needed to say. Shortly before noon, a court officer summoned everyone back. The jury had reached a verdict. Leah's heart pounded as the foreperson rose, a piece of paper in hand. Time slowed as the verdict was read, guilty on all major counts. A collective exhale whooshed through the room. Sterling's face drained of color, his sneer replaced by shock. Leah clasped Bruce's hand, tears flooding her eyes. Through the blur, she saw the prosecution team exchanging triumphant looks and the judge thanking the jury for their service. As proceedings concluded, Sterling was led away, the clang of handcuffs echoing in the hushed space. Leah rose unsteadily, relief mingling with exhaustion. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, but she stood tall, shoulders squared. This wasn't just a legal victory, it was validation that her suffering mattered, that justice could prevail even after years of darkness. When she turned to Bruce, words failed. He opened his arms, and she fell into them, letting the wave of emotion wash over her. She remembered the battered cardboard box under the drizzling rain, the flashbacks, the fear. Now, with the verdict delivered, she felt a door close on that chapter of her life. Justice was in progress, and so was her journey toward a future free of fear. The scent of coffee and fresh pastries filled the air at Pike Place Market, where Leah walked with Bruce by her side. A bright banner hung above one of the local stalls, proclaiming a welcome back event the community had organized, a chance to celebrate Leah's survival, resilience, and renewed presence in Seattle's public eye. The verdict against Sterling had spurred an outpouring of support. Many remembered the story of her disappearance years ago, never expecting such a dramatic re-emergence. As they strolled, vendors called out friendly greetings. A few recognized Leah from recent news coverage, offering congratulations on the trial's outcome. She smiled shyly, still not entirely accustomed to the attention. In many ways, these bustling market aisles mirrored her rebirth, colorful, noisy, and full of life. "I used to hide near that corner," Leah murmured, pointing toward a dim alcove beneath an old awning. The memory of crouching against the cold, surviving on scraps and the kindness of strangers tugged at her heart. "Marcus found me there once, brought me a hot drink." Bruce squeezed her hand. "You never have to go back to that, Leah." She nodded, scanning the vibrant booths of handmade crafts, produce and flowers. "I know." Relief intermingled with lingering grief for the time lost. Yet her life felt like it was finally moving forward. They reached a small stage, set up near the famous public market center sign. Marcus, seen standing off to the side, waved them over. He dressed in a tidy shirt and jeans, his leathery face breaking into a broad grin. Eleanor was there too, elegantly casual, speaking with a local reporter. Dr. Hayes mingled in the crowd, watching Leah with that ever-patient, encouraging gaze. A local council representative took the microphone, welcoming onlookers. The short speech praised Leah for her perseverance, then introduced her with a flourish. Applause and cheers rose as she stepped onto the small stage. Her cheeks warmed at the attention, but she felt a deep sense of gratitude. This was no academic lecture, just a heartfelt moment for the city that had watched her vanish and reappear. "Thank you," she began, voice amplified by the modest sound system. "When I was lost, I often found shelter and comfort among the people here at Pike Place. And even when I had nothing, I discovered there was always someone offering a helping hand or a warm drink. You gave me a reason to keep going." The crowd's applause was gentle but heartfelt. Leah's gaze flickered to the exact spot she once slept, recalling how alone she'd felt back then. "Your kindness meant everything. It showed me the soul of Seattle, a place that can be busy and loud, but still overflows with compassion. I want to thank each and every one of you who helped, even in the smallest ways. She glanced at Marcus, who wiped his eyes discreetly. I want to remind anyone who's struggling, you're not invisible. Whether you need a meal, a friend, or a second chance, keep hope alive. A wave of emotion surged, nearly choking her words. She steadied herself, mindful of the microphone. I stand here today because I found hope in these streets and in the people who refuse to let me give up on myself. Thunderous applause filled the market area, accompanied by scattered cheers. Leah glimpsed Bruce beaming up at her, pride shining in his expression. For a moment, she was swept into the warmth of the crowd, an affirmation that her painful journey mattered. This was not the place of isolation she'd once known. It was a place of belonging. After she finished speaking, a small line formed, people wanting to hug her, ask questions about her story, share their own hardships. Leah greeted each person, heart brimming with empathy. The city that had witnessed her darkest days now reveled in her triumphant return. As twilight fell, the neon glow of Pike Place Market sign lit the bustling square, every bit as lively as it had been that morning. Leah strolled away from the stage with Bruce, Marcus, and Eleanor, feeling a sense of completeness she'd never known. The market, once a symbol of her struggle, had become a testament to her resilience, proof that even from the deepest despair, one could rise and reclaim life, stronger and brighter than ever. Inside one of Auratech's modern conference rooms, Leah carefully placed a stack of printed pamphlets across a long oval table. Tall glass windows framed a sweeping view of downtown Seattle. Representatives from local shelters, community organizations, and academic institutions milled about, chatting in hushed anticipation. They'd gathered to learn about a new foundation Leah was launching, with support from Bruce, Eleanor, and key philanthropic partners. She exhaled a slow breath, steadying her nerves. "You've got this," Bruce whispered, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We all believe in you." At the front of the room, a discreet banner read, "Leah Baxter Foundation for Ethical Marine Research and Social Outreach." The name still made her pulse flutter with disbelief. She'd once been a scientist on the brink of discovery. After that, a homeless wanderer. Now she was forging a legacy that merged her renewed passion for marine biology with a commitment to helping those who struggled as she once had. Eleanor stepped up to the podium to open the event. She explained Auratech's involvement, emphasizing how Leah's story had inspired a surge of corporate responsibility projects. "We're not just funding research," Eleanor stated. "We're bridging science, empathy, and community." Leah's own journey exemplifies that you can transform tragedy into meaningful impact. The assembled guests applauded politely. Leah cleared her throat, stepping forward to address them. "When I first started in marine biology, I dreamed of discovering unknown species, charting new realms of life beneath the waves. But I never imagined life could lead me to a place where I'd lose everything and have to claw my way back. That experience taught me more about humanity than any data set ever could." She paused, scanning the room filled with attentive faces. "I realized that genuine progress in science goes hand in hand with ethical responsibility, and that extends beyond the lab. We can't claim to care about saving marine life if we don't also care about the people in our communities who need resources, shelter, or a second chance." Nods of agreement traveled through the group. Some looked moved by Leah's words, others took notes, clearly eager to learn how they could partner. She outlined the foundation's goals: funding oceanographic research by emerging scientists, establishing scholarships for students who faced hardship, and creating an emergency assistance program for homeless women pursuing education. The synergy sparked excitement in the room. Marcus, dressed neatly in a collared shirt, sat near the front, grinning like a proud relative. Leah gave him a small nod. In many ways, he embodied the core message behind her outreach programs. No one should be discarded just because they fell on hard times. He'd protected her when she had nothing. Now she wanted to pay that protection forward to countless others. After Leah's presentation, a flurry of questions arose. Representatives from shelters asked how they could collaborate. Academics inquired about the specifics of the marine research grants. Leah answered as best she could, deferring to Eleanor for financial details. Bruce chimed in to offer corporate sponsorship details, ensuring that a portion of Auratech's profits would fund the foundation sustainably. By the end of the meeting, participants were scribbling down contact information, forging new partnerships, and proposing future projects. Leah felt lightheaded, exhilarated by the positive energy. The synergy in that room was tangible, like the final piece of a puzzle locking into place. Once the session concluded, individuals lingered to shake Leah's hand or exchange business cards. A few expressed admiration for her resilience, while others simply offered heartfelt thanks for her willingness to share her story. In their eyes, she saw something she'd rarely encountered in the past, genuine hope that change was possible. As the last of the attendees trickled out, Leah leaned against the table, gazing at the banner. She brushed her fingers over the words, "Legacy of Hope." It struck her that for all she'd lost, she'd also gained a precious perspective. She had found purpose in bridging science and social responsibility, forging a path that might uplift countless lives. The ghosts of her past still lingered. Wounds didn't vanish overnight. But with each step, she felt those shadows diminish. A legacy wasn't just about achievements, it was about the difference one chose to make in the world. A cool morning breeze caressed Leah's cheeks as she and Bruce prepared to set off in a small boat on the shimmering waters of Puget Sound. The day was bright, the sky a crisp blue dotted with white clouds. The boat rocked gently at the dock, filled with a few baskets of flowers and a folded blanket. This excursion was, in many ways, a symbolic final step in Leah's healing, a chance to rewrite the narrative that once ended in tragedy on open water. Marcus helped cast off the rope, waving from the pier with a grin. "Take your time out there," he called. Eleanor stood beside him, snapping a photo with her phone. Dr. Hayes had promised to meet them back at the condo, allowing Leah and Bruce a private moment for this meaningful trip. As the boat's engine purred to life, Leah felt a tightness in her chest. She breathed through it, reminding herself that this voyage was different from the one that nearly claimed her life years ago. Now she understood the truth. The sabotage was exposed. Sterling had been sentenced, the rightful credit for her research restored, and her future lay open like the horizon before her. They eased away from the dock, the gentle waves lapping against the hull. Bruce steered carefully, glancing over to check if Leah was all right. She offered a confident nod. The mere act of being on the water again felt like a liberation of sorts, a reclaiming of something stolen. Memories of panic threatened to surface, but she countered them with calm determination. After a short distance, Bruce cut the engine. They drifted on the soft swells, seabirds cawing overhead. The sun cast shimmering ripples across the boat's metal edges. Leah closed her eyes, inhaling the salt-tinged air. For a moment she felt the faint echo of that fateful day, the wind, the ocean's might, but now she greeted it with acceptance rather than dread. Gently, Bruce reached for one of the baskets of flowers. Soft white petals lay inside, still dewy from an early morning pickup. He handed a handful to Leah. "Whenever you're ready," he said, voice subdued by emotion. Leah leaned over the side of the boat. She pictured the many versions of herself that had once floated in memory. The ambitious scientist, the woman lost on the streets, the survivor battling nightmares. With a reverent motion, she placed the flowers on the water's surface. They bobbed, drifting away on a slow current, a tribute to all she'd lost and all she'd regained. Tears pricked her eyes. "I'm letting go," she whispered, her voice trembling, "of the fear, the anger. All of it." She turned to Bruce, lips curving in a soft, grateful smile. "We made it." He set aside the flowers and gently pulled her close. They shared a tender kiss, the gentle sway of the boat cradling them. A wave of peace radiated through Leah, as though the Puget Sound itself offered its blessing. She remembered how Sterling had once used her love for the ocean against her, twisting it into a weapon of greed. Now she felt no power lurking beneath the waves, but the natural, timeless rhythm of life, something she loved more deeply than ever. After a while, they spread the blanket and sat side by side, letting the sun warm their faces. Conversation flowed between them, at times serene and reflective, at times dotted with playful banter about future plans. Leah spoke of returning to research in a part-time capacity, balancing it with her foundation work. Bruce hinted at delegating more of Oratech's daily operations so he could devote time to philanthropic endeavors. In each shared vision, they saw themselves as partners, two souls bound by love, tested by tragedy, and stronger for it. Eventually, they started the engine again. The boat glided gently back to shore, the breeze carrying away any lingering shadows of the past. As the dock drew near, Leah watched the flowers still floating behind them, caught in the ripples of the sea. The sight felt like a promise. Though currents might shift and storms might rage, life continued in ceaseless, beautiful motion. Stepping back onto solid ground, she slipped her hand into Bruce's. Her star-shaped scar, once a badge of suffering, now symbolized resilience. This journey was over, and yet another was beginning, buoyed by the tide of victory that had carried her through. In that moment, Leah felt certain that no matter what the future brought, she had everything she needed to face it: hope, truth, and a heart made whole by love once thought lost. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.